agenda. I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as written.
I second it.
And all in favor? Thank you, Carly, for the sets of minutes. Very helpful. The next meeting of the Board of Selectmen will be on Thursday, October 22nd at 5:30. That will be an online meeting with the patent-free library trustees via Zoom. Did we decide that would be at the town hall?
Wherever you would like to be. We certainly have extra laptops if you want to be at the town hall.
Or we can do it remotely from our
You
home
can, you
locations.
can do it from home if you want to.
Yeah, why don't we do remote from home?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, if you're comfortable with that, that would be fine. And then just come in at some point, sign a warrant.
Right. And we can set up the Zoom so that other people can join in
Yes.
with a special password and invitation so that we don't get interesting interruptions.
That's the goal.
And that will be posted on the calendars. Good, thank you. I have no other announcements. Is anybody else? No? All right. Well, way to go. Sheriff Mary, you're on. Do you need another couple of minutes?
Pardon me?
Do you need another couple of minutes to?
No.
All right. We invited you here. Yes, that would be fine. We invited you here because some people have been asking questions over the summer about law enforcement in the town of West Bath.
Yeah.
You're it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm very pleased to be here in my hometown and share with you just a little bit about what we're doing. So, in terms of law enforcement, because West Bath does not have a police department, the sheriff's office is the primary law enforcement agency. And I did a little bit of preparation for this meeting to show you, just give you a picture of the services that we do provide to the town. And I'm going to, that's kind of like a clerical.
Take one and pass them on.
Yeah, sure. Do that, and it's just a kind of a snapshot.
And these will be posted online after the meeting.
Sure. There may be some extra ones there too, and you're more than welcome to take any of those. So let me first off start by saying, we are a full-service law enforcement agency. We have 19 on the law enforcement side. We do have 4 transport deputies that work primarily between the court and Two Bridges Regional Jail. But the law enforcement side, we provide 24-hour coverage to the citizens of Saginaw County. So that means we have a code deputy on duty around the clock. A lot of that is based on the time of day and the shifts that we provide. So during the daytime, we're always going to have a minimum of 2 deputies on patrol. During weekdays, you have the chief deputy, myself, lieutenant, and as well as the transport guys. In the evening, you're generally going to have at least 2 minimum staffing of 3 between the hours of 9 and 3 a.m. The only time we only have 1 person in the county would be from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. That window of 3 hours in there. As we look at our call volume during that time, it's pretty minimal. But we usually like to divide the county up into a north and a south, and the West Bath being in the south. So that deputy is going to generally be in the Bath area, West Bath, Gorge. The greatest number of calls, we respond to between 5,000 and 6,000 calls typically in the course of the year. The town of West Bath has the second highest call volume of the 7 towns that we provide full-time law enforcement services to.
How many of those towns have their own police department versus?
None. So, there are 10 towns in Saginaw County. Bath, Topsom, and Richmond have their own police department. Pittsburgh has one officer that works pretty much 40 hours a week, and we handle the rest. When you look at Georgetown, Rouselet, Warwick, West Bath, Bowdoin, Bowdenham, and we include Pittsburgh in that as kind of like our primary area. West Bath is the second largest community. So that does not include anything in Bath, Topsom, or Richmond. So when you take a kind of a snapshot look at what we did, what we've done so far this year, and I was kind of going through the numbers for this year, I kind of realized this probably wasn't the best year to be looking at any sort of statistical breakout because of COVID and the challenges and the changes. And we did see some changes, although our call volume is still right on par to where it should be, or where it has traditionally been over this time. But you can see, if you look kind of in the middle of the page there, our total calls for each month so far, and October is for through yesterday, actually. But you can see percent of total calls, and that's the total calls of the entire county that we respond to. So you can see that generally between 15 and 20% of the total calls that we handle are right here in West Bath. And those things above that give you some sort of sense of the things that we're doing in West Bath in terms of calls for service. If you go below that line, you'll see civil process, traffic citations, traffic warnings, and total traffic stops in the town of West Bath. And then below that, I've given you some, what we call a uniform crime report. This is a report that we do to this, give to the state, which is then uploaded to the FBI, and this is where your national stats come from in terms of crime, property crimes, crimes against persons, violent crimes, et cetera, et cetera. For the county, we've seen a downtrend in our total UCR report, where we've gone from almost 200 reportable crimes. There's a difference between a reportable crime and a call for service, of course, but about 200 down to just over 100 in 2019. So I'm not sure where 2020 will shake out in terms of overall crime. But if you apply that standard, you'll see that West Bath, even of our total reportable crimes, and this is thefts, burglaries, assaults, aggravated assaults, those more serious things that people are going to go to court for. Those, if they're arrested, or if, assuming that there's a successful investigation, you'll see that West Bath shakes out about 15 to 20% of our total crimes as well. So total crimes, 15 to 20%, total cost of service, 15 to 20%. The drivers of calls for service in West Bath, clearly a US Route 1. A lot of our calls are related to US Route 1. Traffic offenses that happen on US Route 1, a lot of times those are coming from Brunswick or even from out of Bath. There's a fair amount of that. Accidents, particularly in around foul weather or in the winter months, accidents on Route 1s, which would include slide-offs or things of that nature. Those will somewhat drive your numbers. So that's why I think West Bath is second. Surprisingly, interestingly enough, the town that we spend the most amount of time in didn't tell you that, I don't know if you'd call it a dubious distinction or not, but the one address in the county that we respond to most often is 145 New Meadows Road, which happens to be a stone's throw away from where I live. But I'm not saying that I live in a bad neighborhood or anything, but we do get a lot of calls for service at Green Acres, the apartment complex. This year alone, we've already received 80 calls there, just this year. Last year we saw a dip because last year they were going through a lot of, they were rehabbing many of the apartments, and we had 51 calls for the entire year. This year we're already up to 80 with still 2 months plus to go in the year. It just in the past, in 2018, we had 92 calls there, 2017, 97 calls.
And what are those calls for?
What are the calls for? It could be for any number of things. I mean, so I just ran a list of, and they do run the gamut. So citizen assist, welfare check, probation violation, information, suicide, psychological eval, an order violation, suspicion, welfare check, harassment, serve an order, bail check, disorderly, drugs, assault, bail check, theft, suspicion, an officer standby. You know, I could go on and on. So that just gives you a kind of a rundown. We've, from time to time, we'll meet with the management out there and have conversations about certain individual apartments which are problematic. And I will say they've been really good, particularly the company that took it over a couple of years ago has been pretty good around dealing with some of those 10 issues. We try to be proactive as much as possible. But I think if you looked at your calls for service for the fire department, EMS, you would see many calls there as well. It seems like we're there together a lot. So we just want to mention that. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we do or what we're doing here in West Bath in terms of providing services. It's not a bad little town, even though the calls are high. You can see, you know, some of those calls are property checks. You'll see, we have what you'll see on there is law enforcement details. Generally what the law enforcement details are, it means we're responding to a complaint of speeding, particular speeding in a certain area. For example, we'll run along, if we get a couple of complaints on the Foster's Point Road, we'll start spending time down there. We'll have a deputy do some stationary radar in that area. And also periodically at the school in the morning or in the afternoon during the coming and going the school children and how to go on in Meadows Road. So, you know, that's what drives all of that. You look at actual crime. This year, 16 reportable crimes, pretty much on par with previous years. So, I don't know if you had any other specific questions around calls for services.
What's the uptick in the summer months?
What is the uptick in the summer? Well, as you can see, this month there's a little bit of an anomaly. April was really high for whatever reason. And a lot of that seems to be driven by alarms. And these alarms mostly here in West Bath are residential alarms that we respond to. There's a few commercial alarms, but primarily the alarms that we respond to are residential alarms. A lot of times waterfront property. Some of them are seasonal homes. In the summertime, we see an increased volume of traffic. Not surprisingly, you see some of the traffic warning citations and traffic stops up during the months of, July and August. We weren't stopping a lot of vehicles in April, May, and June. We just, for reasons related to the COVID-19, the order that I put out to our deputies was only stop the greatest violations. It's a matter of public safety. So a lot of people got passes, and we're kind of wondering because we've seen a lot of very, I want to say erratic operation, but a lot of aggressive operation of motor vehicles, and that's not just in West Bath, we're seeing that across the county. And when I talk to my counterparts in other communities, in other counties, they're seeing the same thing. We've got roads that in Bowden that they don't need to put hot top on it. They got enough rubber laid on them that they'll be satisfied for the next year. I don't know what it is, but we did really see an uptick in the number of calls for kind of aggressive driving as we progressed into the summer. So, but like anything else, generally speaking, when we get to the summer months, it's mostly traffic related. I think you also had some other questions you wanted, things that you wanted to talk about.
Yes,
Also.
part of the discussion came up several weeks ago. We had a citizen come to us concerned about somebody that seemingly had a target practice going on too close to a home. There was another concern raised about noises late at night, disturbing neighborhoods, etc.
Yes.
And I know there are some firearms things, but we don't have a noise ordinance. And
Right.
somebody has said, why not?
Yeah. Well, ordinances in small rural communities are, as you probably relate to the board, are a little bit different. Ordinances are generally civil infractions, and by state law, they're enforced by either constables or the municipal police department. And whereas you don't have a municipal police department, you may have a constable by statute. You may have a codes enforcement officer, for example, would be empowered to enforce certain ordinances. But ordinances that are enacted by the town are not enforced by the sheriff's office or the Maine State Police, and that's written in statute. What you can do is enter into an agreement with either the state police or the sheriff's office to enforce your ordinances, and it has to be specifically laid out. We've done that in a couple of instances since I've been sheriff. It's not real common, but there's just some certain legal nuances that have to be met in order to do that.
Would that be for specific ordinances?
Yeah, so the town of Bodenham had an issue shortly after fireworks became legalized, and their issue primarily was concerned near, they had a couple of farms with horses and riding lessons and those kinds of things, and neighbors were setting off fireworks in the middle of the afternoon, and the horses were responding, and it was creating a dangerous situation. Warnings and kinds, conversations with the individual did not lead to the desired outcome. was against the law, I wouldn't do it, but it's not against the law.
Oh.
So the town said, okay, then we'll pass an ordinance, but how do we have the ordinance enforced? And so we went back and forth, and we actually came up with an agreement and was able to do that. And I'll tell you, we've not had to act on that ordinance since it was implemented. It's not to say there hasn't been a call for a fireworks complaint, but one of the things in the ordinance was an initial warning, and so that seems to have taken care of the problem. That's being proactive, and we're all about that. I would be cautious not to get into a lot of ordinances, a lot of contracts and whatnot, so that we're having to do a lot of that work. But there are specific things, like parking, we wouldn't be able to enforce parking regulations or things of that nature. We could if we had an agreement, and it was spelled out in the agreement, of course, but.
How many officers do we have with you?
So in patrol, there's 13
13?
assigned to the patrol division, yeah, and then a lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and 11 patrol deputies.
Lieutenant and sergeant, more administrative kinds of?
No, the sergeants handle calls, share
Out on the
calls,
road, too?
yeah, they're on the road, yeah.
So we, Sabino had a situation about a year ago. An individual would come through the woods and attacked a woman who was jogging.
Yep.
And trying to understand how we could have received a better warning for the residents.
Right.
I know Code Red is something that's out there, but it wasn't necessarily engaged. So what can we do to maybe develop a more proactive approach should
Yeah.
something like that happen again?
Well, that's a good question, and dependent on the situation, Code Red may have been something in that. That was kind of a fairly quick moving situation. Yeah, as you recall, and
I live over there.
and the individual ended up taking a vehicle.
With a dog.
And so then Code Red would have been not as good. And the individual was apprehended within a half hour in Brunswick, and so
Which is, I guess, as it was unwinding,
unfolding.
that no one really knew,
Yeah,
and we kind of got bits and pieces, and neighbors were kind of calling, so we're trying, I guess, when you've got young kids or other
Yeah.
families, that how can we be proactive for our community?
it's a great question, and it's something that we struggle with, because as you're getting bits and pieces of information, we're also getting bits and pieces of information. And so you want to make sure that anything that comes out of the sheriff's department or any law enforcement agency is as accurate as possible, and is directed to the right people as much as possible. So it creates a difficult dilemma for all of us. Certainly if there's a situation where we thought we had, and we just had a situation just recently up in the town of Bolton. You may have heard about it. It was a week ago. There was a chase that was sued, and the vehicle went off the road. It was a pit maneuver by a state trooper. People believed to be potentially armed took off into the woods. And so, we had to make a decision. Do we notify, a certain area of people utilizing the Code Red system, or no? So in the situation last December down in Sabino, I think by the time we knew who we were looking for and kind of where they were directed, we knew that they had a vehicle, and we alerted other agencies, and then again, it was just a matter of literally minutes before the vehicle was stopped, and it was located in Brunswick.
So how do we know if the residents are engaged in the Code Red platform? I mean, what is the
Yeah.
protocol, what is that
Yeah.
response? What
So
is-
that is, you kind of have to sign up for it, and then it's used very judiciously. I want to be very clear about that. So when it's used, and primarily what we've had the greatest success using it is with missing persons, or missing children, things of that nature. And we've actually been very successful with it in the county. It's good. We've also used it in a couple of areas, most notably in Pittsburgh around some weather-related events down there.
So is it opt-in? Is it?
It's an opt-in, so you have to go online and you have to provide a phone number or an email address, phone number you can get. So you can get texts, you can get calls, you can get emails.
So something that perhaps we should post on the site if people want to join the platform,
Yeah.
how they can.
And I can certainly give you more information on that. We were kind of pushing a big sign for it year and a half ago, and I think, to be honest, it primarily comes out of the emergency management agency, EMA, and I don't have a problem connecting with those people and see if we can do another push because we get into the winter and try to remind people to sign up for that. I mean, we don't use it to make general announcements. It's just used in what we would call emergencies when we've got information in hand. That's good. I think what you said about being proactive and alerts, that's really good. The other thing with Code Red, it does take a few minutes to get it set up and get it launched because you have to identify the area that you're going to send out to, the neighborhood, and what the message will be. And in that message, we have a kind of an internal check system, not one person can do it. So if I wanted to send it out, one of my deputies wanted to send it out, they'd have to contact me, and then I would have to also notify the EMA director and the communications director. So it's kind of like that three-person have to be made aware.
Before you push the red button.
Right, that's what it is.
I think if I don't believe my family's part of it, I would certainly like to be part of it,
Yeah.
and certainly give everyone else the opportunity to join if they so choose. But would like,
That's
something
just, yeah.
happens, like replicating what happened in Sabino.
Yeah.
I would love to have known that in advance, in case something goes amiss and you
Yes.
wanna.
I can get some information and drop it off at the town office
That'd be great.
and share that with you. And I'm sure
You can even shoot it by email and then I can post
you'll
it.
shoot an email to everybody. I mean,
Well, at least they know that they're
Two
part of
copies.
it, I mean, you don't even know if you're part of it or not at this point, so it's.
yeah. But I mean, I have both my cell phone and I sign up for tax info, so one time, we launched one for a missing gentleman down in Pittsburgh, and I got the phone call, and I got the text message at the same time I'm getting the phone call, so it does work, it pushes the information out pretty quickly, so.
I have a future-oriented question. At some point, Doug Alexander is going to decide that he doesn't want to be our Marine warden anymore. And he's going to decide that retirement seems like a really good idea, which is going to be a bad day.
I don't know anything about human cloning.
I know. So would there be a possibility for the county and the town to make arrangements? Doug, I know, covers both Phippsburg and West Bath.
Yeah.
Could we then, looking forward to a lamentable future,
Yeah, I think that's great.
could there be some kind of agreement between us and maybe Phippsburg, or just us and the county, to provide those law enforcement services? We do need them on the flats from time to time.
Yeah, the short answer is yes.
Okay.
And that can be done in a couple of different ways. Other counties, particularly the coastal counties, which I'm very familiar with, but my friends up in that county, have agreements with municipalities to enforce, where they deputize someone to enforce those laws specifically. Hartswell contract with the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office for, specifically for deputies to work in Clam Flats and Shellfish.
So are they then employees of the sheriff's department that are doing it?
They are in Hartswell, yeah. Yeah. But, you know, I think one of the other things that is, in other counties, they've used a model where it's, you know, part-time employees that are just given the authority to do that, and that authority comes through their being deputized to do that. Again, in agreement with the city, with the municipality. And, you know, what's appealing to something like that is the regionalization of it.
Right.
Having two towns and you know, that is something we've tried to do with like animal control. That's been a little bit difficult nut to crack, but you know, there are opportunities there. I know in Lincoln County, for example, they're doing animal control for like 6 communities. They've got like one full-time person that's on duty like every day, but he's working, and there's enough, you know, there's enough calls, and they have a system as to how that's paid for by, you know, proportionate to every community. So, you know, things like that are not, they're not undoable. They're absolutely, and it makes sense.
Right, so we should perhaps,
The key is finding the right person, the right Doug.
there is no other Doug.
Yeah, I know. And his wife, who is the clerk of court here in West Bath also, so, you know, don't tell me that they're gonna retire, but, you know, I don't wanna hear that.
Well, I don't have any inside information, I'm only looking at normal kinds of, average kinds of life cycles.
Yeah,
At some point, somebody gets up in the morning and says, I don't wanna do this anymore, and I've reached the age where I don't have to.
yeah, yeah.
And,
No, I
somehow,
think you're right to be looking in advance of that, certainly.
yeah,
And I think what you said about animal control might be something too, especially if we keep having an increase of rabid animals.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the calls early, and I think it was January, February, and the animal calls were up, and that was all totally related to, matter of fact, right over here, we ended up shooting a fox one night, where the deputy was staring it down, like,
Unfortunately, I called my father one night and he had to shoot one because it went after him,
yeah,
so.
yeah. That deputy was literally scared. He
They're
was,
quite
he was,
rampant out here.
yeah, so,
I think he would not have been sane had he not been scared.
yeah, so,
The
But,
other
you're right.
thing, really, I don't think we address is the complaint about the firing range or firing too close to houses. Who would, is that something that you guys would take the lead on, or is that more of a warden?
either or, I mean, I was trying to think what, I think that's Title 12, which is what the wardens work under. The criminal code is 17A, the motor vehicle code is 29, fishing game code is Title 12. And I think the laws regarding discharging a firearm near a residence with a Soy Creek resident, I think it's a Title 12 violation, but I'm not sure, but it could be enforced by either one. But the game wardens have, you know, mutual law enforcement jurisdiction. They've taken oath to enforce the laws of the state, not just the fishing game laws, but all laws. Same thing with the Marine Patrol, same thing with state police, same thing with us. So, it could be either one, you know, so the laws are very specific on what the distance can be. And, you know, oftentimes we get called on these, if that distance is met and the firing is away from the residence, there's really not a lot of options that we have. even though they're, you know, it's 500 feet or whatever it is, of the direction of fire, is towards a residence, then, you know, you can do something about it. It's away from a residence, and it's outside the legal distance.
What about potential of lead and contamination of water around, or like how much?
So there's other rules, laws pertaining to fire and ranges. If somebody's just behind it on their property shooting, then I don't think that's,
Not enough lead contamination.
yeah, that's not something that I, you know, feel that I could give you a good answer with. I won't disagree with you about, if I'm trying for the body of water, right? But I don't know what I'm not aware of
Yeah.
prohibition on that.
And some of it again goes back to noise too.
Yeah, so the noise thing is, you know, we responded to calls. We get both. We get calls that people, I'm hearing people shooting guns, and it's fireworks. Or we get reports of people letting off fireworks and it turns out that someone's up behind the house and they're doing some tactics. You know, try to have a conversation with those folks, but again, because of how the state laws are written, we don't have a lot of options. And the noise ordinance that some communities have, like almost like a curfew, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. You know, the fireworks state law has a time, 10 o'clock, I believe it is. But
If West Bath adopted an ordinance that addressed, you know, a noise ordinance that established a curfew, is that something that you could potentially enforce for us?
again, it'd have to go back to the contract.
Right, but is that something that you would consider entering into a contract for that sort of a
Violation.
violation?
Oh, again, we've done it before with another town in the county, so we could do it, like we could do it again.
I just think, again, like you said, that it will stop at the other place. I think if we had some kind of ordinance here, and people were aware of it, it would eventually stop. Because I think it's always a few individuals that ruin it for everybody. So when you've got people at 1 o'clock in the morning having a 4th of July fireworks display, they know what they're doing, they know they're with the agreement, they know it's not.
Right.
So I think again, if we knew it, then I think it
Well, having a curfew works in the other direction too, nothing before 4 or nothing before. So there's, you know, various noise issues that we have early or late, playing on both spectrums of that.
So if it's something that you want to consider, I mind, you know, having a conversation and sharing with you what we did in Bohemian.
I'd be curious to see the language you have for that ordinance also.
Yeah.
I would like to have that conversation because it seems like a lot of the issues that we're hearing about are really, they end up being about noise. Whether it's fireworks or guns or, you know, whatever it might be. It just ends up coming back to noise.
Yeah. I mean, I could look, I know we do have some calls for, you know, disorderly conduct, I guess is what we might call that. But I don't recall us getting an abundance of them here in West Bath, so.
We don't have
And I
an
know some,
ordinance against it so that they know they can't call.
I know some people
So
don't
it's
call,
just
they
like-
just, you know,
There's no, right now, no resolution to that.
they call you, or they call.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I work down in the Meadows on the weekend part-time, and there's a lot of stuff going on there, a lot of stuff. And your offices have been fantastic. They're there quickly, they respond quickly, and whatever the issue is, they dispense with it. I mean, it's gone, and some of it's been pretty bad, and you don't see those individuals back, so he does a
Yeah, like I said,
issues.
and part of that is dealing with the you know, management at Green Acres, that, you know. Yeah, and there are a lot of folks that have lived out there for a number of years, and we've gotten to know them. And some you can build a rapport with, and, you know, enough's enough, you know, and some get it and some don't. But we know a lot of the ones out there.
I can call and just say the color of the truck you guys know who it is.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't want to,
But no, it makes
You
me
know.
feel safe, because when you're walking in there at 3:30 in the morning and you're the only one going in there, there's nobody else
Yeah.
around. I'll see you at the sheriff's car parked across the street with me.
yeah. So, and, you know, what I'm seeing more of is people walking on the Meadows Road. That's what I see a lot, and that worries me a little bit, only because of, you know, the traffic and visibility. And on the, you know, on the west side of the road, once you get past the school there, you got also a little bit of a gully, so you don't have a lot of space to, you know, get off the road in a hurry, you know. And I think they've given up on the sign in front of Green Acres, because that's been taken out twice now in the last 5 or 6 years by Cackle and Dearborn, you know, so.
Maybe some way in the future, we can get sidewalks on the Meadows Road.
Yeah, yeah, no. We got a traffic light at the end of the road now, maybe, you know, we can continue with that.
It's not until January.
Yeah.
We've got the, no, we have it now. We
It's
just-
there, it's us. It's not working, but, you know.
It's there. I want to jump in too fast.
Every bit can probably check.
Yeah, well, you know, I wasn't disappointed, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't disappointed when I heard that traffic light was going in there. Because, you know, we've handled some pretty serious significant accidents at that intersection. And I've also personally ended up, you know, waiting, you know, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, you know, and for that opportunity to go out. And, you know, having a traffic control device, which is what lights out, what we call traffic control, that has a calming effect. So that's going to slow traffic down in general. So I'm not opposed to it at all.
Well, the then board resisted a lot. But I think it's quick. In the meantime, traffic has increased a lot, it seems to be on that corner,
Yeah.
and everywhere. So it's going to be a benefit, particularly when that little ice forms on the Foster's Point roadside,
Yeah.
and you're trying to get out into traffic.
Yeah.
It'll be much safer. Do we have any more questions from us? Do we have any questions, comments from?
Yes. Are we going to have a ordinance for noise?
Well, that was what we were discussing.
That's right, and I'm just wondering if we are in favor of it or not.
Well, I don't know what the ordinance is yet. We haven't.
Noise.
I know, but the specifics of how the ordinance would be written so that it would be A, enforceable, and B,
Okay.
neighborly.
So if there is a noise, what I want to ask you is, if I have a complaint about noise harassment, is there anything you can do about it?
So, when you change the dynamics of it, when you say harassment,
Well, I think it is, more or less.
and that puts it in a different context,
Okay.
and that is certainly something that we would look into. Because there is a difference between somebody who's, again, this is what, I go back to the situation in Bowden because it was something that I'm familiar with, and that's what it was. It was based on what was perceived to be harassment. You know, there was nothing to prevent that person from doing it. So once we told him that now there is a law, he stopped, and you know, but if we think it's harassment and the situation is such, then you get into, harassment, disorderly conduct, those kinds of things, so.
Well, I mean, it's something that happens.
Every situation is different,
Yeah,
obviously.
it's true, but it's something that happens all the time, throughout the whole year. Dirt bikes without baffles in them, four-wheelers without baffles.
On private property.
It's on their property, but it has been on my property, and I confronted the person, and I asked them, the noise, why you have such noise? He said, well, this town don't have an ordinance, and they knew it. So, I made a complaint, that didn't go anywhere. So if I was to call you, would you do anything?
Well, right now, we might be limited as to what we could do.
I mean, what would you do with it? I mean, could you go see the people? Or,
Right, yeah.
Or do I have to record it, or all that sort of thing?
No, that is sometimes helpful, but I think if we knew the situation and who was engaged in the activity, to go pay them a visit.
Well, actually, the whole neighborhood knows about it. Not many people dare say anything.
Yeah. But if it's harassing or if it's bothersome to a whole neighborhood, then we should probably have a conversation with the individual.
All right. That's what I want to know, because I know sometimes you say, well, you have to have a license number, you have to, verification. Sometimes you can't get that. I mean, I can record it and all that sort of thing, but how far can we go here?
Well, a lot is, if it's harassment, the law's pretty specific about a warning and an after a warning, if the same action continues,
And also,
take action.
the noise from the bikes and whatever is illegal because they're taking the baffle out and whatever. Is that where a warning steps
Well,
in?
dependent on the motorcycle. If it's for off-road, then that would not require, I mean, you're getting into inspection standards for on the road.
If it's constant, it does harasses a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's why I was wondering if the town had an ordinance, then can it be enforced? So,
I think it's something that we are gonna explore. But you're not the first people that have commented and had
yeah, I'm sure.
concerns. It seems to be something that's ramping up in this town, so I think it's something we need to find out what our options are and look at those and pull all the citizens back together.
Yeah, there is a process to have an ordinance approved. It's
Yeah.
written, that it's from the planning board, and it's approved, then it goes to the town to be voted on. So it just doesn't happen if the community has involvement on the passing of it.
I'm sure it's happened in other areas.
Oh, yeah, but it's not something that we can't do it. It's something that the language is created and presented to the town to vote on.
Okay. All right. Just thought I'd bring it up.
Am I gathering that you are all here because you are concerned about that particular issue?
It's
Well,
our
it's a neighborhood.
It's in your neighborhood.
Yeah, it's always.
I'm gonna take my mask off to
Oh,
speak.
it's night and day too. It's not just.
I believe I'm here for the same
Yeah, I'm sure.
purpose as this gentleman is. My name is Diane Walsh. I live on Twilight Lane, which is off of Campbell's Pond Road. And there's been an ongoing issue
Yeah.
with noise, and it's continual. And I tried to think to myself tonight what word I could use to express what the noise is. And the word I came up with is unbearable. It is unbearable.
There you
And
go.
it's been going on for 10 years. The source of the noise is dirt bikes with no mufflers, ATVs with no mufflers, car engines revving
Yep.
constantly, continually. It happens in the morning, it happens at night, it happens when you sit and you want to watch Wheel of Fortune in the evening, every single evening. It happens when you're having a cookout. It happens when you're on the phone with someone. It happens constantly. It's unbearable. And it's all coming from the same residents. And I've tried
calling the sheriff's department, which they're fantastic. They show up, they speak to the residents, and it might quell the noise for maybe a day if I'm lucky. I've spoken to the parents, and the parents say to me, there's nothing I can do, they're teenagers. So at this point, I know I'm, not gonna get any resolution. And, it's just ongoing. They're on the public streets, the dirt bikes. You can drive down Campbell's Pond Road and see taking photographs of it, the screech marks all over the streets. They're going around my property in the little cul-de-sac. They're turning around. They're in the woods. They've got jumps, so it's continual. It's going up in the woods, down the hill, up the jump, up in the woods, down the hill, up the jump, for hours.
Yeah.
Is that jump on their property?
Yes, it was just,
Not on, are they
Well,
on
I
their
don't
property? No, not all the time.
not all the
In
time.
fact, they've been on my property and no one's ever asked. And I confronted them and they,
Yeah, you
Are
get
dirt
an
bikes
answer, you
legal?
get an answer like, there's nothing I can do, they're teenagers. That's what the parent
now,
told me.
although, yeah.
No, the short answer is no.
So the dirt bikes are not legal on the street, so now we have,
No, and
So
that's
that's illegal?
that's what your sheriff asked me when I called.
Yeah,
And,
and we just gotta be there when they're doing that.
well, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
So
When
when
the
they-
kids were in school, I used to tell the sheriff, show up at 3 o'clock.
yeah,
Because they get out of school and
That's
they
easy
do
said
it.
than
But
done.
as soon as they see me come up my hill, they scatter. So they're aware of what's going on. The entire neighborhood, which I think most of us are here for that reason, is just, it's unbearable.
Yeah.
I see the sheriff's taking notes.
yes.
What was the name of this road that you lived on?
It's
The
Camp, my street is Twilight Lane.
Twilight, yeah, thank you.
And I'm directly across from them, a little bit down, but, they're on Campbell's, they're 45 Campbell's Pond
Yeah,
Road, if you
that's-
wanna know the
that's
exact
the number.
address. I've given it to your sheriff
Yeah,
department
okay.
before,
I know, I'm
and I'm sure you're aware of
growing, I'm
Yes.
connecting dots now, yes.
it. And I'm not in favor generally of punishing an entire group
Yeah.
for the violation of one person. But in this instance, I would urge all of you to please consider some kind of noise ordinance. If that's the only way that we can solve this, then that's why I'm here, to ask you to please consider putting some kind of an ordinance or something to stop this.
Yeah, it is bad.
Because,
It's all year long, it's not
no,
just summertime.
and
It can be in the winter, it can be on a rainy night, it can be at 12 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning.
yes, and in the winter, I mean,
Yeah.
I am so used to the sound, I know the sound of their engines.
Oh, God, yes.
So I can follow their engines and they go up into the woods, they come down, they cross over, which is High Street is where they cross over, they go down onto Winnegans Creek, and they come by my house on the ice. So you can't get peace. It's just, you can't get any peace ever, and it is 365 days a year.
It is. I was gonna say 300, but let's go with the 360.
Yeah, I know, maybe we'll get,
They don't take weekends off, huh?
no, weekends is worse,
And
they're not in
actually-
school.
Actually, too, there's been times when the sheriff shows up that once they leave, they actually get worse because,
Oh, yeah.
you
So
know,
that's
they're
where the
immature.
harassment, the retribution comes in.
They're emboldened because you don't do nothing, because you can, and they laugh, and it gets worse
And they
sometimes.
swear obscenities at
Oh,
us
yeah.
and.
And I've said to the parents, I don't mind the kids riding dirt bikes. I know it's fun, the ATVs, they're fun. But do it in the woods. They tell me, oh, we have 9 acres of land. Well, then send the kids out into the woods, or put the mufflers on them. If you just put the mufflers on the machines, it's a little bit more bearable.
But they do,
But without the mufflers,
yeah.
it's just, It is unbearable,
And
is
that's
the
how they
word.
do it, they get to an age now, they're doing it with cars.
Well,
Cars are ripping up, and they're using the roads more now.
Well, it's a part-time auto.
Yeah, well, that's all, that's.
So the parents, so you speak to them, and you come down and you're sitting in your living room, and then you hear the parents doing the exact same thing.
Yeah,
Because I even know the sound of the flatbed truck
yeah.
when it's coming to deliver a car. So I say, oh, here's the truck. So I know in 45 minutes, when they get the engine running on the truck, on the car that was just delivered to the garage, it's gonna be revving the engine for an hour and a half.
Is it a registered auto repair?
Constantly,
No, it is
constantly.
I know.
And then they get in the car once they get the engine going, and they drive down the street, and I can trace it all the way down to Winnigam's store. That's a mile from my house. You can hear the engine that far away. They turn around, they come back, and then it's in the garage. Yesterday, sure you all heard it yesterday.
Yeah, we did.
It was all day
It
long.
It
was.
was.
It was in the garage,
Yeah.
revving the
Yeah,
engine.
I hear it, I'm right beside it, they're on that hill.
Yeah, I'm down the hill, so the noise comes right over my house.
Yeah.
And the person who owns the garage has told the town that it's a hobby he does for friends and
Well,
family.
they know they know the catchphrases, they've learned the catchphrases, like, it's not a business, it's a hobby.
Yeah, well,
So they get around things that way.
people
But-
in their cars that have them fixed.
In the
I know
meantime,
It's
it's unbearable.
It's
That was the
excessive.
word that I came up with
It
to
clearly is a
describe it.
very difficult situation,
It is.
and enforcement of what laws there are is very difficult because of the situation that you find yourselves in.
Right.
But clearly, there is a growing desire from a growing number of people in town for at least some kind of ordinance that would at least give law enforcement some
That's why I'm
recourse.
here today, to ask you all to please consider
Yes,
putting into place some kind of ordinance. I know it's all gonna be work for you, and it's gonna be work for the sheriff's department
And
to
it's
try.
gonna be work for you, because you're gonna have to work with people to convince other people who don't have that problem in their neighborhood. So
Right.
you all are gonna have to be activists on
And
this.
like I said, I'm not in favor of punishing a whole town for the violation of a few, but if that's the only way we can get something done, then that's why I'm here, to ask you to please consider it.
Often why laws are passed, because somebody won't behave themselves, so.
But just, it takes time.
Oh, I
It's not like
understand
anything
that.
you can.
Believe me,
It has to
I
get
was
voted on,
babysitting my
and
niece,
Go to town meeting.
and who was an infant, and she's now 8 years old, and I remember calling and saying, I'm just trying to get her to sleep, and I can't get her to sleep with the noise. And she's 8 years old, so,
Joel, as we work on
It's
this
been
as a
Yeah.
town, what are your recommendations in the meantime?
In the meantime, when those situations occur, you should call us. If you can identify where the noise is coming from, and who it is, give us a call, and we'll have someone, and then we've got a record of it. And that all of a sudden becomes very good data to have when you want to try to enact an ordinance, because you can say that this is what's happening, so having records of it. And then if, we're getting into situations where there's a willful intent to disturb someone's peace, then you can begin to look at other laws.
Okay.
And that gets into the harassment. If, the part about after the deputy leaves and all of a sudden it intensifies, well, okay, then maybe we need to come right back again and, address it in a different fashion. So, and it's something we're willing to run by the district attorney's office,
Okay.
at least, and see that. But the idea of working on an ordinance is probably something we should, have another discussion about, and, because that process is, it's bigger.
And to maybe see how it would affect the warden service as well. Warden Franklin wanted to be here tonight, but they had a scheduling issue.
Yeah, particularly some of the, crossing the road and
Right.
driving, are the ATVs registered, are the dirt bikes registered, those kinds of things. There's other issues there. How old are the offenders? Even if they're riding ATV on private property, they're wearing proper headgear. There's just a lot of other
A lot of moving parts.
other things. So the more we know, the better we're able to respond.
So your recommendation would be that if and when, after the deputy made an appearance, had a conversation, the noise became more intense or closer, or any of those things,
Yeah.
that the neighbor should call immediately
Right.
back as soon as something else happens.
Is there a particular time that they get out of school, is there
I have an incident on a Sunday evening between 9:30 and 10. I was sitting in my living room, all of a sudden I hear this, like someone had taken their motor and put it into a high gear and left it there. And realized they were out front on their wheeler in the road, just doing that. And then they turned around, squealed off. We have that nice new paved road that now has squeal marks all over it. If for no reason, then just to be an ass, I'm sorry, that's what it is. It's willful intent at this
It
point.
can be any time, day and night. I've had it
Yeah.
morning, afternoon,
Yeah.
evening.
could you add them to your patrol route for
Yeah.
a bit?
Oh, definitely.
It's just,
And I've had, yeah,
Information tomorrow morning.
everything you've just said, I've talked to your sheriff
Yeah.
about as well. He
We'll
said
do a little research on
he
it.
tried to patrol, he went up and
So it's
talked
not-
about if the ATVs were, at one time, he said they weren't registered, and, I think he asked the kids, said the kids had to go to some kind of classes or something, whatever, and they obviously did, and then they just come back and do the same thing.
Oh,
So it's just nothing gets through.
how old are they?
Oh, I don't know, I think Scott knows the kids better than I do. I mean,
They're teenagers.
Well, if they're 16 or less, the parents have to be in full sight on an ATV, or they're breaking the law.
well, they're less,
The
they're less,
safety,
and
it
it's
might
been
be
10 years.
They're both.
But the safety course requires that in full view of your parent while you're riding. So there's
Yeah.
components
But
that,
you're talking about a parent who's supposed to be there.
but if the parent's not there, then they're violating.
Yeah,
16 to 18 is a different set of,
Yeah.
under 16.
Yeah, no, I think they're older than that.
Sometimes you hear the parents' car leave, and that's when they start.
Yes, mom and dad are gone, so then we can act
So
up. because we're
it's
in the-
almost like, we've sat in our yard and said, oh, here goes the parents, it's gonna start, and
It does.
it does.
Well,
So it's,
we hear you.
thank you.
And we will work together to get those situations solved.
I appreciate that.
We can do what we can do as a municipality, and Sheriff Mary can do what he can do with law enforcement, and this seems like a place that you need some relief.
When we started talking about this a while ago, not knowing anything about Campbell's Pond, we've had some complaints about other areas in town, so it seems to be a town-wide issue, so.
And we're
hopefully
all
we'll get some
quiet
support.
neighbors, you'll find. We've all lived out there forever.
Yeah, I've been on my property for 3 generations, I'm the 3rd generation to own it. Never have, it's always been peaceful, and now it's not.
That's very hard.
So thank you, I appreciate, I have to be somewhere, I hate to run out in the middle of your meeting, but I
That's
just
fine.
appreciate very much that you let us come here tonight and talk to us, and yes, I'll be willing to work with you or anything you need, and I thank you, Sheriff Mary, for your input as well.
We may be in touch.
Thank you.
so long.
Thank
See
you,
you,
guys.
see you later.
Any other concerns for the sheriff? Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate it. We'll be talking.
You're welcome.
And in the words of that old television show, let's be careful out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you. What's that?
Who'd you hire?
Mr. Olson, a resident of West Bath, by the way. And he gets just sworn in yesterday. So he's now a deputy sheriff, and so he's got a vested interest in keeping the town of West Bath safe. So we just hired a deputy sheriff who lives as a resident of West Bath.
Oh, good.
Awesome.
To live on Campbell's Pond,
David.
I think.
No,
We keep all of the safety.
yeah, they all live on Browns Ferry.
Yes.
Yeah,
We're gonna rename it Safety Way.
yeah, Safety Way. But David was on our oral board for that, so.
It was interesting.
I want to publicly thank him for participating in that.
It was interesting, though.
Yeah, it is, it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. information.
Thank you.
Good night.
Business item number 2, the town administrator's report. What's that for us, Christine?
I have a lot of nothing tonight. I really don't have anything to report.
We'll take it.
After last week,
You went to work,
yes,
okay?
so no new
You
news,
talked to citizens,
nothing of note.
okay, that's good, that's good. What do we wish for future agenda items? We have, next week, we have the libraries on Zoom.
Were we going to talk about this letter that was drafted, or
Um,
Yes.
we can do that under other? Okay. But yes, we should.
And then, can we get some updates on the water line at Wing
That'll
Farm?
be November 5th,
Okay,
yeah, with the roads.
okay.
It'll be sort of a joint infrastructure, roads and Wing Farm extravaganza.
Okay.
do we have on our website yet about forming that road committee?
It's probably not on the website yet, it's been very busy in the office, but
I think it is.
No.
The invitation?
The
Internet,
internet, the broadband is, but the road
the road
committee
is
is
not
not.
yet.
Did you want to advertise the road committee?
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
Okay. We have had a decent amount of people respond to the broadband. I'd say we've had like 6 or so.
Very nice.
I've got Comcast coming out to do a speed check at my house on Monday, 7:30 in the morning.
Oh, good.
It's not working so well down there.
Oh, sorry,
Yes, I want to thank you for hearing us, and
that's our job.
hope something will happen. So, we're going to leave now, so thank you very much.
Yeah,
Well,
thank
just
you
give us a
very much
minute
for
to get it
coming out.
together. It won't be overnight.
Yes, well, thank you very much.
We're trying.
Taking care of this.
We'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So I took a stab at a response and wanted you all to take a look at it. Additions, subtractions, corrections, editorial comments. I'm an English teacher. Every writer needs an editor.
So are we in other now?
We're in other.
I'm not good at that because I have someone in my office that always edits it and sends it back to me.
Well, mostly when you read the letter, it's like, is there something that says, that doesn't make any sense, or we need more explanation, or something like that.
Perhaps we should change, in the sentence, several complaints, maybe to issues. We're not repeating complaint. An investigation of either your issues concerning, and several complaints, or a complaint and several issues.
We could do allegations.
Yep.
First or second?
I would say allegations first.
just concerned under 41 Foster's Point. It says this property has ongoing list of violations. Please see the file. I don't know if we want to put that on there. I mean, we should, I think, just address the,
Well, that was from John's notes, so
Right.
we really can't change his notes.
but when you send something to a complainant, please see the file.
The file is public record.
You can say,
It's
or
not
I would say,
addressed.
instead of saying, please see file, we should perhaps say, file available for review.
Well, those are John's notes, I'm not gonna change his
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah, we can't do that without consulting him.
Well, maybe we need to consult him because that really makes
Yeah, I
no
mean,
sense.
that would be fine, but I don't wanna go ahead
Right.
and, tell him to make changes to his.
Well, it's just because the file's not available unless they come and ask for it.
Right,
So I see what
that's
you're
how
saying.
it works.
Again, he didn't
Yeah.
address the issues of the complaint, he just said see file.
Right.
I think it's simpler if he just addressed the issues that the complainant had made. Because see file, you may open a whole can of worms, you know.
Yeah, I just wanna be clear that it
Right.
would be public record.
Right.
If
Right,
somebody
and I-
requests.
and
Oh, yeah, we're not saying you can't look at it, but it's just not
Yeah.
their review.
But then you should be doing that to all the rest of them, but the rest don't have files.
Correct.
Yeah, I just think
Every
every
property
that's
has
what
a
I'm
file.
saying.
Yes.
If they didn't mail
But
a
I
complaint
mean, like
about
it's
something, you shouldn't.
Can we ask John to,
Just address the issues that was presented.
I think we should also put in here, that many of the initial concerns were not, relevant to residential properties.
Well, I think he's got this all.
But in the letter, we addressed many, I'd say many of the concerns were not, at the workshop held October 8th, many concerns, many of the initial concerns, were not relevant to residential.
okay, yeah, something like, it has been determined.
Well, every single one of those had, the first two concerns were not relevant to residential properties.
It also been found that many allegations,
Or many items addressed, many items addressed in each of the initial concerns were not relevant to residential properties. Let me see, and of those properties, we found, I want to say it was 3, that truly had beyond 2 unregistered vehicles. We have to find out what that number is, I want to say it was.
I'm looking, he's got them all listed here.
yeah.
I only see, on what he's got listed, I only see 2.
Well, it was plus, it was actually,
Oh, he had
1, 2,
more, these are the
3.
actual,
Right,
this is the current.
4.
right, maybe we can ask.
4 of the 10. It was 0, 4, 2, 2.
So the numbers we needed to change, need to be changed in here.
Yeah, there were some specific.
I really hesitate to change his report though, because the
Right, we-
report is a snapshot.
No, it's not, it's in our, I would say, for our response, I would say, many of the initial concerns.
What I would like to do is talk to John about the changes that were made in the workshop, and then to talk with him specifically about the Foster's Point property. So that they,
Because we had someone here listening to and taking notes, and this is different than his notes, which it is.
right, right. So,
But it appears right now, yes, I completely agree. It appears right now that only 4 of the 10 complaints have motor vehicle
right,
Yeah.
violations, which is the only element that we can address as code enforcement. All 10 assets that were presented, or properties that were presented, do not, the first 2 complaints were about commercial
right.
and not applicable to residential.
Well, how's about if I take this back, we
The only thing we brought
Reword it.
was the vehicles, right?
That's the
Right.
only violation that we can
Right.
address, right?
So that we can take that up and talk to John about the amendment as discussed, and then we can resubmit the letter, I think.
Yeah, because I think this 272 Hill Road, we don't end up having 70,
Yeah. So we,
which is excessive.
Well, and it was not 3 or more, it was anything over 2
Two,
would
right.
became a violation.
so, so with clarification. So so we can amend the wordage, and we can take another look at it.
Okay,
You're gonna do some wordsmithing?
I'll do some wordage,
All right.
and then we can, you and I perhaps could find a time when John's in the office and chat with him about the wordage.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, because we don't wanna change his wordage.
No.
Never change somebody's wordage without permission.
so I have if we're done here, I have a question on something other. So, what was the status of moving the moorings?
I have not been able to get in touch with Joe, which I find fairly frustrating. I have 2 numbers for him. On one of the numbers, the mailbox has been full for a long time, and the other number, there's no answer. So, before I go and bang on his door, I didn't know if maybe you wanted to take a different approach.
Can we send him a note?
I could do that,
Ask him to come visit us?
yeah, I haven't asked Carly or Julie if there's an easier way to get in touch with them.
I've always called and his wife is typically home and answers the phone and they have an answering machine.
The answering machine has not picked up,
Not having
So-
issues getting a hold of him, but it is hunting season, so he might just be away.
yeah, that might be it. I have been going through our waterways and harbors ordinance. It's very weak. There's nothing in our ordinance to say that he cannot do what he did, moving the mooring. The only concern, according to the language in the ordinance, is that it's the mooring owners, they're required to maintain their own mooring.
But if someone moves
So
it,
if they're responsible for their mooring, and they're required to maintain their mooring, and to make sure that their mooring is safe, then, that sort of contradicts moving a mooring without
one,
authority.
and not ensuring that, there's a lot of component to selecting your mooring location based upon rocks that could be not as deep in a different location that your boat could swing into at low tide.
Right.
So there's other elements that affect the placement of mooring, that having someone move your mooring without permission.
But I think it's also a personnel issue around professionalism, letting the person know what you're doing.
Right, and that, a personnel issue, of course, needs to be
Correct.
discussed in executive session rather than.
The ordinance also says that the harbor master has the right to require that a mooring be moved to accommodate another vessel. So I'm just suggesting that we take a look
So
at this
we
ordinance.
may need to look at our,
We need to look at the
What?
ordinance before we go to next year's town meeting perhaps, and tighten up some of the language, have Sally take a look at it.
And perhaps
Because I
we-
think a lot of it probably isn't enforceable.
And perhaps you look at some of the other, I know in Phippsburg, when you register a mooring, you actually put the number of where it's, so maybe we should start locating.
We do have an application with a fair amount of information that's required.
but a GPS,
GPS coordinates are typically on there, but a lot of times they don't know where the mooring will be placed
Right.
until they speak with the harbor master.
But you
So
can-
it's often
but-
not filled in.
but you can require it to, you can say this must be before your stickers, before your renewal period or something.
Register the GPS.
Say that again? How would they?
Why wouldn't they?
Well, in theory, it's up to the mooring
Yeah,
person.
but they have to get the coordinates from the harbor master.
Well, you
Maybe
could
that's-
agree upon it.
Put it in the ordinance,
What's that?
put it in the ordinance.
Well, you should,
It has to be in
a
that one.
GPS location must be confirmed
Yeah.
Well, that'll be the harbor master will confirm it.
by the harbor master and included in your mooring application.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that we need to, because you just can't move it and
Well,
then
that
not,
doesn't need to be an ordinance, that could be a policy, right?
well, it's part of the harbor, it's
It
part of
would
our,
be better in an ordinance so that the harbor master and the board can enforce it.
People are
It-
out there
the-
changing each
the-
other's moorings and everything.
well, because as soon as it's GPS located, mooring number 15 is at this location, if that's where that location is. I mean, it kind of is mirror, it matches your application to your, because you get your sticker and it all
And
kind
then
of
for any
jives.
reason, somebody else outside the town needed to know, I don't know, state warden or something,
Yeah.
or something, you would have that on file.
Yeah, like if your boat's taking on water at your mooring, they need a way to contact you, and they need the mooring 15 is yours, and
What we have here is an old ordinance that needs to be updated.
What we have here is an opportunity.
And that is always a good opportunity to make things better for all of us who live here. So,
we should probably
we could go to work.
request some language from some other waterfront communities like Harpswell or Phippsburg as to what they have in their harbor ordinances, so we can replicate some of that.
I'm sure that there is samples provided by the state
Absolutely.
as well, so,
There's gotta be, because.
yeah.
Let's face it, we're a small town, we didn't do a lot of those things, we didn't have to, we're grown,
Well,
and we
you
have
just-
growing pains.
but you need to have common courtesy too, I mean, on some of these things, that's just not.
Yeah, and I really want to hear his side of the story
Yep.
too.
Absolutely.
But regardless, let's put something that's more definitive.
So
In
does
place?
this have to go before town?
Yes.
I love David sitting in the back. Yes, it's for me, I love it. So that may be something for, are we having a town meeting in March?
May.
May. So, but that's, so if we are making changes, we need, that's something that we need to,
Yeah,
it's, because it takes some time.
that's why I'm bringing it up now.
Oh, you think May?
It's not that far.
It's
Yeah, we-
not
I mean,
far.
we need
It's
to
gonna
plan
come
on
fast.
Having language essentially ready for review in January, the latest, I'm guessing.
Right,
Time flies when you're having fun.
yeah.
Turn around, get right to work.
Yes, there, and the old comprehensive plan did call for a more orderly way of assigning moorings and placing mooring areas, so it's probably, what, 10 to 15 years later, it's definitely time to go to work.
Right.
So, let's take a look at some possibilities after the election, probably.
That's 2 weeks. He's 3 weeks, 3 weeks.
Stop rushing
I want it over
It's
with.
2 weeks away, it's 3
Are
weeks.
you guys voting for, oh, you won't tell me? Oh, I can't believe it. You won't tell me? Oh, please get this election season over.
That's just gonna make me have to run out to Dairy Queen and get my free Blizzard now.
Okay,
What a baby.
do we have any other?
I think I'm good.
Christine, could you, in your spare time at the office, find us some sample mooring
Sure.
language?
Yeah.
I know there's plenty around.
And maybe even some noise ordinance stuff you wanna throw in there, just to take a look at, just, you know, while we're doing it.
Yeah, because when we look at that noise ordinance, I wouldn't want to look at 4 AM is too early for those trucks.
Yeah, and I think,
It's two ends of the spectrum, one's late at night and one's early in the morning.
I think there should be at least 6 hours period of time
Yeah.
that people can sleep.
and Sheriff Mary was very careful to say, oh yeah, we'll take care of that for you. And I understand that, because whatever language we adopt, they need to be able to enforce it.
Yeah.
If we're adopting a curfew, yeah, I think he probably agreed that that could be enforced.
But it's also a curfew and then an awakening piece to that. One's
Yeah.
going to bed, the other part is not before a certain time, perhaps not higher than a certain decibel.
Yeah, see, that's another thing we need to ask the department, because I want to make sure they can
Right. They,
measure it at this point.
if we're going to pass or upgrade any of our ordinances, we need to make sure that they are enforceable. Because we've got some lovely ideas, but if we can't get a case before the district attorney, we might as well be whistling in the wind. And there's no point in wasting our time or theirs.
But it definitely sounds like we have.
But it does sound
support.
like, we have an issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I can really hear the frustration. And I think.
I didn't realize they were all here for the same thing. Like, why is everybody here tonight? In the crowd.
I figured that they were here because they wanted to talk to us, and they wanted us to know. So good. Are we ready to go home?
Yep.
Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Chair Flintoff?
Christine, couple of things. I can help with you, this, I'm sure.
Oh, no.
You know,
David, what did you